Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have you on this webinar with us tonight. I wanted to start by introducing myself. I'm Allie Maxwell. I'm the Associate Head of School at Forman, and we're all really excited to talk to you about managing stress in teens. And we wanted to also start off with that we've really launched this webinar series as a way to connect with people that may know Forman or people that may not know Forman. So, really, anyone who's interested in this topic is highly encouraged to join our webinar, and we also hope that you'll interact with other webinars, maybe even reach out to us to let us know what you would want to see in a webinar, and you'll see our contact information at the end. We'll also be sure to follow up with a recording of this session as well. So welcome in. We're really excited to be here with you, and I'll pass it off to Chris.
Hi, just to introduce myself, my name is Chris Simmers. I'm the Director of Cognition and Learning here at Forman, and we'll pass it off to our other colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
Hello, my name is Jenai Fitzpatrick, and I am the Chief Cognition and Learning Officer here at Forman.
And my name is Dr. Brenden Ostaszewski. I'm the Science Department Chair. I also am the Health and Physical Education teacher here at Forman and the Strength and Conditioning coach.
And I'll start us off with just an overview of the session. If you've been to our webinars before, you know that we aim to keep them around 45 minutes, providing time as well for question and answer at the end. That said, we absolutely encourage you to use the chat as questions pop up. Please throw them in the chat, and if we don't address it during the talk, we'll get to it at the end of the talk. So for our 45 minutes together today, we're going to start with just an overview of stress and the brain. Then we're going to look at specific connections to the teenage years and neurodiversity. And we'll follow that with some research-informed strategies that you can apply at school, at home, in any setting with a large age range, but mostly with specific approach at Forman. And we'll close out with a question and answer session. But again, use the chat, throw questions in there. We'll be monitoring that throughout the talk. So we'll start off just with thinking about what is stress. When most of us think of stress, you probably think first of a stressful situation like being in a car accident or being under a tight deadline. And you think of these negative, high stress situations. And that is very real and probably the first thing you think of. But I want to just invite us now to think, is it ever possible for stress to be a good thing? Does good stress exist? And we'll talk a little bit more about it later on this slide and then later on in the talk. But the answer is yes, like stress isn't inherently bad. There are aspects that can be helpful and aspects that are not helpful. So just to frame that up when we're thinking about stress, the other thing that's important to remember is that stress is highly, highly individual. So people will react to different situations very, very differently. Two individuals can go through the same experience. One might experience it as highly stressful in a negative way, and the other might not. So just remembering that stress is very, very individual, both in what causes stress, but also in how that is presented. So one person, when they're stressed, might, give classic anxious tells, like, they look like they have a very worried face, and you might pick up cues like that. But for somebody else, it might be much more discreet. They might just go quiet, or they might have a little fidget that shows that they are stressed. So remembering that it's very individual and personal to the actual learner. So some common stressors can be academic, but also social. And environmental stressors, again, very individual. So lighting, sounds, different things about the environment can be more or less stressful for different individuals. And it can be good or bad. An easy example of this is if you've ever known someone who likes to have a deadline to get something done. That introduces just the right amount of stress for them so that they are motivated to get it done. For me personally, if somebody's giving me directions and I'm not the one who's going to have to drive there or walk there, I do not have enough stress to pay attention, right? But if it's me and I'm responsible for listening to the directions, that introduces just enough stress that I pay more attention, motivates me to really do what I need to do to get where I need to be. And you can imagine a scenario where that stress goes too high. And if I'm too anxious about getting where I need to be, I'm not fully listening to the direction. So one example, But when we talk about good and bad stress, eustress is that good stress that's helpful, and distress tends to be more negative. And Dr. Ostaszewski is going to talk about that in more detail. And again, remember, this is very individual. So what is good stress for one person might be bad stress for another. So what does this look like in the brain? To get into this, we need to be careful about two different distinctions. When we're talking about stress in general, we talk about acute stress, which is very short, like minutes to hours. And that can be, you've probably heard of the fight, flight, or freeze responses. That's been expanded to also include flop and fawn, and there are some other possible responses to stress, but that's that acute phase. Another type of stress can be chronic, and that's when it's happening over weeks and years. And we're going to look at the brain and see how it responds differently in these two settings. We know that chronic stress, Dr. Ostaszewski is going to talk about this more, can lead to some real health issues for lots of reasons, such as elevated cortisol. We'll dig into that a little bit more. But just remember, when we're talking about stress, it's important to distinguish between acute and chronic. So what does it do in the brain? This is a huge oversimplification. Whenever we're talking about the brain, it's important to remember that none of these parts that you're seeing do only that one thing, and none of them work in isolation. So in actuality, the brain is a much more dynamic, interconnected system than this. But to simplify it down, you may have heard of the amygdala as like a gatekeeper, or the part of your brain that reacts to stress and emotional arousal that can react to positive or negative. But in general, if you're having a stress response, the amygdala gets activated and it can start sending out signals to your body to help to keep you safe. That's really its priority. So when it does that, when the amygdala detects a threat, there's a few things that happen. One thing is the hippocampus, which you see labeled there, which stores learning and memory. It's not actually stored physically in the hippocampus. The hippocampus kind of organizes where the memories are stored. The hippocampus, rather than storing those memories, is actually involved in setting off that fight, flight, or freeze response. It's involved in the HPA axis of just setting off the chain of events to help keep you safe. So if your hippocampus is busy trying to keep you safe, what is it not doing? It is not organizing your learning and your memory in the same way as it would be in a less stressed situation. The other thing that can be happening when you're in an acute stress response is the prefrontal cortex is less activated. Why? Because your brain is putting all of its resources to trying to keep you safe. And so your higher order thinking, you're regulating your thoughts, emotion, and behavior is less active during those times. So that's in the acute stress. What happens when it's chronic? Unfortunately, we can actually see in brain scans of children and adults differences, physical differences in people who have lived in chronically stressful situations. So some of those changes can be a thinning of the prefrontal cortex, a more enlarged amygdala, and some differences in the structure of the hippocampus. So essentially, the brain is not working at its optimal potential when you've been living in a state of prolonged stress. The good news is neuroplasticity is a thing. We can make changes to our brain all the time, but the impact of stress has some really concrete effects on our brain and our entire being, really. So how does this show up in teens? Adolescence is such a rapid time of all kinds of changes, hormonal, cognitive, social, and it can bring a lot of exposure to new stressors, which makes adolescence a potentially vulnerable time for new stresses to emerge, and a particularly important time to make sure that we are providing our teenagers with all the best resources to manage their stress. There can also be heightened emotional demands in this time. And we do see an increase in internalizing problems. Those are things like anxiety and depression. So we know that the teen years can be tough, and it can be a time when we really want to be intentional about the supports and the strategies that we're providing for our learners. And how does this intersect with neurodiversity? Neurodivergent teens do tend to have higher rates of mental health difficulties, and there's lots of different reasons that could contribute to that. There are some theories that diagnoses like ADHD may, in a sense, make the brain more vulnerable to stress, But there are other ideas that say that maybe being a neurodivergent individual in a setting that isn't set up for you is inherently more stressful. And so the research isn't clear on that. And I'm not sure we could ever truly unpack, one true cause, but what we can do is think about what are the best resources we can provide for our neurodivergent teens or any teens so they can be the most supported. So I have there a chicken or the egg, because if we try to think, is it that the neurodivergent brain is more vulnerable to stress, or is it that these learners are in more stressful situations because they're in environments that don't suit them? Kind of a chicken or the egg problem, but what we know is that teenagers deserve good support and good strategies to help manage their stress, and neurodivergent teens in particular, deserve our best care and attention as well. And so we're going to move into some concrete strategies that we can use for that population. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one more important part to mention, which is the variability within diagnosis. So when we say ADHD, a learner with ADHD, for example, it used to be that we would talk about ADHD as a spectrum, and you'll hear people say this. You'll hear people say, "Oh, that person's like very ADHD," or "I have a little ADHD." And what we're doing now to move the conversation forward is, rather than talk about these labels as a spectrum, more or less, this is a representation of ADHD, as an example, as a web. So what you can see here there are multiple elements that are generally involved with an ADHD diagnosis, and the web is meant to show for this individual where they fall within that web. So for this individual, focus is less of a concern, but hyperactivity and sensory needs are higher concern, or areas for higher support. It would be a better way to address that. So that's just a reminder that when we talk about neurodiversity or any of these labels, there's a huge amount of variability within any one label. And really the most important thing to do is look at that particular individual in order to design the best supports for them.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So if you have signed on to these Zooms before with us, you will already know that we truly feel that executive function coaching can be a really empowering kind of strategy to work with teens. And so I want to just look through that lens of executive functions. And really, this is connected to emotion regulation. So as Chris said, especially in those acute stress moments, when the stress goes up and the thinking brain gets quieter, we need to help them take a pause, right? We need to say, what is going on? Where is this coming from? And especially in the spring, right? Everything is ending, everything is due, and emotions are really high. And typically for both people involved, I know as parents, we can certainly be pulled into that as well. So our job is, of course, is not to lecture or even problem solve in that moment, right? Because it's so escalated. Nobody's even really thinking clearly. And so how can we help them reset in the moment? What does that look like? So we like to think of it as a stress triage. Now, this is something I've certainly done with my own son. I've used with girls in the dorm. Think about late at night, 9:30 p.m. And they're having some sort of strong emotion due to stress, right? They're shutting down, they're snappy, they're emotional, they might even freeze. If we pause and ask, is this a body problem, a task problem, or a story problem? So body, what does that mean? We're talking about sleep, hunger, thirst. Are you sensory overload? Have you been on your screens too much? And if it's body, of course, the best support is regulation first, right? You're going to give them some fuel, like some small snack, some water, take a movement break, some deep breaths. If it's a task, then consider what that really means that's stressing them out. Is the task itself too unclear? Is it too big? Is it too many steps? Is it just too much at once? How can we break that down to reduce the load and shrink the first step to make it visible? And then last, is it a story? Is it this narrative that they're creating? And it doesn't mean it's not real, right? It's very real for them. But what's going on there? Is it perfectionism? Is it fear? Like, is it, I just can't handle this. It has to be perfect. And if it's a story, we try to help them reframe, right? What is good enough? We help them find one small entry point to reduce pressure. And the reason why this matters is because if we choose to assume that it's just the task, but it's really exhaustion, then they're not going to get very far, right? We might be helping them when honestly, they just need to go to sleep. If it's the story and we only fix the task, then the fear stays. And so how can we help them identify what's really going on? So which one is really driving this for you in this moment right now? That's the pause, that's the reset. And now that we've started to identify what the root could be, I'm going to let Dr. O explain some research-informed strategies to help us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenai. Yeah, so my goal for this segment is to build practices of awareness and then provide you with some actionable tools as it relates to strategies to mitigate the harmful consequences of stress. So if we take a look at the visual on the right-hand side, you'll see the words biological, social, and psychological. So this is also known as the biopsychosocial model. So this was developed by Dr. George Engel. The purpose was primary medical from a medical perspective. But here we can tie in how it relates to stress. So stress is not a single event, but it actually is a dynamic interaction between these three different areas. Again, social, biological, and psychological. So some examples of biological stress could be related to physical health, genetics, exhaustion. As it relates to social health, it could be work pressure or school pressure, community support, or if there's a lack of support, relationships, and also psychological. So it could be one's mindset, any triggers that one individual has, or any sort of anxiety. So stress tends to happen when the demands in these areas exceed one's resources. So, for example, if there's a problem in one area, such as a social conflict, that can actually create symptoms in another, such as the biological area, which could cause high blood pressure. So a potential solution to this could be building resilience. So resilience could be built by interleaving any of these three dimensions to break the loop. Here at Forman, we take into account which is called the deep health model. So the deep health model was popularized by an organization called Precision Nutrition, where they certify health coaches as well as nutrition coaches. But if we take a look at these components or these 6 different pillars, we are aware of how different areas may have an influence on one's stress. So again, if we look at one's physical stressors, such as physical movement, if an adolescent is overtraining, if we take a look at mental and emotional stress, one's mindset, focus, and emotional regulation. We can also take into consideration existential stress, such as one's sense of purpose or meaning, social stress as well, a lack thereof, or support a network that acts as a stress. And lastly, environmental. So environmental could be one's environment, workplace, home life, and et cetera. So to build resilience, we have to learn how to be aware of all these different pillars. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's another good visual. I know Chris Simmers mentioned the difference earlier about eustress and distress. So not all stress is bad. So you can take, this is also known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. So the Yerkes-Dodson law illustrates the relationship between pressure and performance. So basically showing that stress is not always negative. So that sweet spot right in the middle is termed eustress, okay, which is also known as good stress. So moderate stress does provide the arousal needed for peak focus, motivation, and efficiency. Now, the issue that happens is when the tipping point occurs. Okay, so every individual is different. They can cross this threshold when some sort of different triggers may have an influence on that. And also distress. So on the left-hand side, We had mentioned when demands exceed resources, performance drops sharply, leading to burnout and anxiety. So again, this is a good visual, basically showing that not all stress is bad stress, but we have to be aware of how these stressors have an influence on our lives. Next slide. Yeah, so the next actionable steps that I'm going to provide are actual actionable protocols that I'm going to provide. I want to share that there is no best plan. So one size does not fit all as it relates to the harmful consequences of stress. I do want to mention that everyone is different, and one method may not necessarily work for others. However, I find these upcoming methods that I'm going to share with you to work best and are actually supported by research. So I'm a huge proponent of sleep. I personally believe that sleep is the foundation of health. If you get a good night's sleep, I believe everything else will fall in line. But before I share the associations between stress, sleep, and light, I do want to share the changes that occur during that adolescent time period. So there is a biological delay. Puberty can potentially shift melatonin release later, making teens naturally want to stay up later. So I don't know if you personally have ever experienced that, but you'll notice that adolescents will want to stay up later. Also, not at Forman, but at other schools, early school start times force teens to wake up before their biological rest is complete. We're very fortunate here to have a later start time here at school, so we take into consideration that component. And also social factors too. Nowadays, a lot of teenagers are on their phones, for social reasons. So screen use and academic pressures can actually worsen chronic sleep deprivation. Now, I want to talk about the association between stress, sleep, and light. So the first study was conducted by Kambalk et al. Basically, what he found was, and his colleagues found that while everyone experiences stress, some people are biologically hardwired to have their sleep fall apart because of it, making individuals more likely to develop long-term insomnia or depression. So again, going back to that awareness piece, we have to take into consideration one's biology as well. McEwen et al. In their study, McEwen et al. And colleagues, they explored how both sleep deprivation and circadian misalignment act as a form of wear and tear on the body and the brain. So they discovered that short-term sleep loss and chronic circadian disruption acts as a significant physiological stressor that accumulates as what is called an allostatic load, which basically is just like a bank account of all different types of stressors, which could lead to severe consequences ranging from impaired memory and mood disorders to systemic issues like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and neurological decay. The other frame, so there is an association between stress and sleep, and also light as it relates to one's circadian rhythm. The framework that I want to share with you, this is where the actionable tools start to come into play. This was developed by Dr. Matthew Walker, who's a sleep scientist and researcher. He has an excellent book called Why We Sleep: Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. But I got this framework from him. So this takes into account the quantity, the quality, the regularity, and the timing of sleep. So if we think of quantity, in general terms, we should aim to get approximately 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Now, again, everyone is different. Everyone has different chronotypes. Some may be better on the lower end of the spectrum, some may be higher, but generally getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep is the aim. Quality. So quality, we want to focus on getting uninterrupted deep sleep without that fragmentation. So waking up throughout the night multiple times per night, we want to try to avoid that. And the next method is going to kind of help with that, and which I will share shortly. Next, regularity. So we hear about regularity. We actually want to get consistent bed and wake times to stabilize that internal circadian clock. And lastly, timing. So try to align sleep with your natural chronotype. So you'll notice this. Myself, I'm a morning person. I prefer to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. So I know I'm a morning chronotype. And we're very fortunate because we take into consideration here at Forman that during that adolescent time period where many adolescents want to stay up later at night. So we have a later start time at the end of the day. The next method I wanted to share with you is called the 10-3-2-1 method. So if one does drink caffeine, try to eliminate caffeine 10 hours prior to bedtime because caffeine can actually impair or interfere with sleep. And the half-life of caffeine is approximately 6 hours. So say, for example, if you ingest 100 milligrams of caffeine, which is close to a standard cup of coffee at 12 noon, 50 milligrams is still in your system at approximately 6 p.m. And it depends on the metabolism, but that's an estimate. 3 hours before bed, try to avoid, so have your last meal approximately 3 hours before bed. If you have it too close to bedtime, that can actually disrupt your sleep as well. 2 hours before to bed, no work time. Okay, this allows you to mentally wind down. And lastly, 1 hour before bed, no screens. Because especially if you look at your screen, it emits blue light, which can actually interfere with your melatonin secretion and impair your sleep at night. So the goal of these methods, and especially the 10-3-2-1 method, is to transition the nervous system into a high alert to more of a restorative mode. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a great one. This is called the physiological sigh. I practice this on a regular basis. I actually practice this with my students. The students can implement this any time of day. They found benefit before a heart exam. But basically what it is the physiological sigh is it's a breathing technique that was popularized by a neuroscientist from Stanford called Dr. Andrew Huberman. He also has a great podcast called the Huberman Lab. So this is a rapid tool for lowering stress by utilizing the double inhale followed by a long exhale. So we'll practice this together. You can practice this at home very shortly, but let me just explain this in a little bit more detail. So this specific pattern reinflates what is called the tiny air sacs in the lungs to maximize carbon dioxide offloading while simultaneously engaging the vagus nerve to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Think of the resting system. So by lengthening the exhalation, so taking a longer exhale, you send a direct calm down signal to your heart, effectively slowing its rate and shifting the body from a state, again, from high alert, fight, which is also known as fight or flight, to a state of intermediate physiological calm. So I'll practice this very quickly. So you do one inhale, another quick inhale, and then one long exhale. Now you can practice this 2 to 3 cycles, and instantaneously you may notice a shift and a reduction of stress and a reduction in arousal. Next slide, please. Next, I also want to talk about physical activity and exercise. So I'm a huge proponent of how implementing physical activity and exercise into one's routine and how it can help reduce stress. Most of my studies were in exercise science, but I do want to share with you some studies that actually show that this can actually help reduce stress, and especially in adolescence. So we know the brain benefits. So brain benefits associated with exercise. So acute exercise or short burst of exercises has shown to actually improve one's prefrontal cortex. Again, the prefrontal cortex helps with decision making in young people. So I want to share this study with you first because there is a link with physical exercise, the brain, and the body. So basically what this study found was that a single bout of vigorous aerobic exercise, so if we think of aerobic exercise that's running, jump roping, etc., significantly improved, again, the prefrontal cortex. In this area, they showed increases in working memory and attention for up to 2 hours post-exercise. So the participants in the study engaged in a total of 60 minutes of physical activity, which included a 5-minute warm-up, 50 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic exercise on a stationary bike, and a 5-minute cool down. So again, there is an association between, or a link between the brain, the body, and which I'm going to share with you, the next study, a reduction in stress. So research that was published in Frontiers in Psychology suggests what is called a nature pill, or 20 to 30 minutes of walking outdoors can actually lower one's cortisol levels and alleviate stress. So by immersing oneself in an outdoor setting, whether it's going for a light walk, a jog, and intentionally avoiding any sort of like digital distractions like social media or phone calls, individuals can trigger a measurable physiological shift towards relaxation. So interestingly, in this study, they found that while the biggest drop in stress hormone occurs within this half-hour window, the specific setting or time of day is less important than the act of connection itself. So we're very fortunate, again, here at Forman to have classes where you're able to walk on a beautiful campus from one location to the next. So we're fortunate to have these students get a lot of exposure to nature. In terms of prescription, I want to share with you some physical activity guidelines that are currently provided by the American College of Sports Medicine for school-age children. So for those who don't know, the American College of Sports Medicine's mission is to promote and integrate scientific research, education, and practical opportunities of sports medicine and exercise science to maintain, enhance physical performance, fitness, health, and quality of life. So what this organization recommends, they recommend that kids and teens should aim for approximately 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity, which could be mostly aerobic, 3 times a week of muscle strengthening activities. And the benefits that have been associated with this in research shows better bone health and heart health, healthier weight, and also a reduced risk of depression. And the last talk I wanted to talk about is the GSPA, which also stands for Goals, Skills, Practices, and Actions Framework. So we actually use this in our health and PE curriculum as it relates to goals, but it can also relate to stress too as well. So think of this as like a streamlined behavioral change by using a bottom-up approach to reduce physiological stress. So if we think of goals, okay, so this is the high-level vision of one's desired outcome. If we look at skill or skills, it's the specific abilities required to reach the goal. And then if we look at practices, these are daily habits that build and refine those skills. And lastly, actions are immediate, such as like 5-minute tasks that make the practice manageable. So you can have one actually perform this exercise very quickly. So here I provide an example. So this person had a goal of wanting to stay calm so I don't blank out during an exam. A skill could be I'm learning to control my nerves before they turn into full-blown panic. A practice could be I'm training by taking time practice tests to get used to the pressure. And lastly, that daily action is I will breathe deeply every time I turn a page to keep my focus steady. So what I personally have noticed is when students follow or just really focus on that one action, they take one more step closer to that goal.
I love that. Thank you. Really encouraging the student ownership. And another way to think about that through the coaching lens is something that I like to think of as debriefing and co-creating. So tonight, we've obviously discussed some in-the-moment strategies, right? We have, whether it's the stress triage or the sigh, I love the sigh as well. Those are things in the moment, right? But we also know that when things are really, really heightened, it's hard to get anything past that moment. We just need to reset the nervous system, or at least pause and get momentum building in a positive direction, right? And then we have what Brenden was talking about, which I think are really the foundational practices or lifestyle practices that, like, getting better sleep, paying attention to light, obviously movement, time outdoors, which build resilience over time and raise stress capacity. So one thing I want to offer is to really lean into the bigger changes and how to put a coach lens on that. So again, in the moment, it's really heated. What if you were to wait until the next day or the next time you're at dinner and you say, wow, this happened. I noticed you were feeling this way. What do you think we could do, right? So naming it, that was a really hard moment for both of us. I noticed that night you were really tired. And I noticed that actually last night it happened too. What do you think we could do together? Like what could be something that would help you work past this so that we find a way so that you're not feeling that anymore, right? Like that's my job as the adult in your life, is to help you find the strategies that work for you. That's not me as the adult telling them what to do, giving them the recipe of success and how to move forward. It's really trying to get their buy-in and for them to say, you know what, you're right. Maybe they'll say, I don't know what to do, or maybe they won't be ready to buy in at all. But you're at least starting that conversation in a moment where it's calm. Ideally, you're both or the whole family is truly present with one another, and you're able to have that open dialogue. And again, it's so hard, I know, as the adult, not to say, I know you need more sleep, or I know you need to be getting off your screen sooner. But again, what if we reframe it as what can we be doing differently as a family? Because I know I myself, and I'm sure most can agree and or can connect with this. I also feel stressed, right? Like even when my child is not feeling stressed, there's a lot that we carry. And so owning that as well, I think can really bring everybody onto the same page. And so again, what may help? What's one small change we can make as a family? Maybe that's going to bed earlier. Maybe that's turning our screens off a little bit more. But what's one thing that you can do? So our encouragement, and this is how we typically try to wrap up our time together, is really getting you, the adult, to figure out like what's one small moment that you may want to approach this or one small change even for yourself that you may be ready. Because the more we have capacity to handle stress, the more we're actually going to be able to show up for them in those moments as well. So again, as a family, I love the debrief and co-create. I do this with my students as well. And it really can allow for, again, open and honest dialogue. And when they're ready, even if you have to revisit it a couple times, it can land you in a really cool place of empowerment. And again, like your student child will often surprise you with their self-awareness and what they know they need to be doing. And because it's coming from them, not from us, they're immediately so much more likely to follow through and then it just becomes like a fun conversation. So I hope that you find that helpful and enjoy that process.
So what's next? Thank you so much to Chris, Brenden, and Jenai for sharing all of their knowledge with us. They did a phenomenal job. We're excited to continue the conversation if it's something you're interested in. We know there's a variety of different attendees at our webinar right now, whether there's some current parents, past parents, some alums, friends of the school, maybe some potential friends of the school that we haven't connected with yet. So know that you can reach out to us via email. There's also an inquiry form. And as I said, we will be following up with an email with a recording of the webinar so that you have it if you wanted to look back on it. So please know we're here and really look forward to connecting with you and would love to see your face on the other side of a Zoom if you do have more questions and want to talk through anything that we've brought up today. But now we'll open it up for some questions. We had some really great questions that have been sent in. And Chris, I'm wondering if you could go back to the ADHD web and maybe talk through how you would understand where your child falls in that, and tell us a little bit more about that process.
Absolutely. I think so. This web is coming out of the book that you see there by Emily Kircher-Morris and Amanda Marin. And this conceptualization comes up all the time when people ask for specific strategies to match specific diagnoses. And it's not always, the easiest answer, but the answer is nearly always it depends. And so what this web does is help to expand our understanding of how different labels might show up in individuals. And you can use this with the learner themselves. Absolutely. Help them to self-reflect where they fall in these different categories. So the way that this is set up is thinking of areas where that learner would need higher support. Those are the dots further out on the web, and areas where they would need less support. The other tricky thing here is that not only is there a huge amount of variability within one diagnosis between individuals, but also within any one individual throughout their day, where they fall on that web will change. So let's think about focus. Think about anyone you know, doesn't even have to be a teenager. Their focus, their capacity to focus in the morning, midday, evening, that's going to change. During math class versus during boat building versus during lacrosse, going to change. And so I find this web really helpful to, one, broaden our understanding. Two, you can use it as a reflective tool with that young adult, teenager, whoever. And three, to start to understand some of the variability that can happen in different contexts as well. Allie, does that get to what you were talking about?
It does. Thank you so much, Chris. Um, how do you navigate when your child is kind of struggling with maybe habits and decision making, and you're trying to get them to buy into maybe healthier habits or the conversation? Kind of how do you navigate increasing that buy-in, and maybe try to make it a pattern of buy-in over time?
I can talk about this, Allie.
That
Yeah,
sounds great. Thank you,
yeah,
Brendan.
that's a great question. So to learn a little bit more from that person, I like to do an exercise called what is called the five whys. So basically, you're just asking why and why over again, just so it allows you to gain more information on that child or adolescent that you're working with. So, for example, if somebody was saying that they're stressed about a test or something. So you could be like, why are you stressed for a test? And they'll explain why. I didn't study. Why didn't you study? So you may be able to identify and pinpoint what's kind of like the root cause of that issue. So it just allows you to bring more awareness. And then in terms of breaking a bad habit, there's a great book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he provides some information on how to break a bad habit. So I know a few of those. So one is to try to make a habit invisible. So this includes maybe like reducing exposure or removing the cues of your bad habits from your environment. You can also make it unattractive. So you can reframe your mindset. So highlight the benefits of avoiding your bad habits. You can also make it difficult. So you can increase friction, so increase the number of steps between you and your bad habits, or use a commitment device. So you could restrict future choices, maybe to the ones that benefit you. And another one is to make it unsatisfying. So you can get like an accountability partner, ask someone to watch your behavior. Also, I know he mentions in the book that you can create a habit contract. So make the cost of your bad habits public and painful. So those are just some examples that come to mind.
Thanks, Brendan. Jenai or Chris, would you add anything to that?
I would just say, It's a great question, and I'm sure many adults on this call have a similar one, right? All of this is so much easier said than done when you're trying to co-create a plan with your teen. And it really all depends on their readiness and willingness to engage. I think the best attempt starts with small seeds. And again, even if they're not there yet, just keep trying. You could also encourage them to kind of experiment and just ask them to notice if they're like, no, I have not been stressed, or I haven't been this or that. Like, share observations, perhaps without judgment, but then also just encourage them to notice the next couple days. And then I did have another one, and it just flew out of my brain. Where was I going to go after that?
That's okay.
Um,
I think there was a follow-up question that maybe that will help you get some of that out, which is when there's kind of, it's not just trying to get them to buy in at part of the time, but say there's really resistance, or no interest in an alternative, kind of
mhm.
maybe how to shift that.
Yes, and actually that did connect to my other thought.
Great.
I do realize that especially in our scenario here, I work with other teens, right? I am not mom, dad, adult that is at home. Um, I play a different role, right? And so sometimes I do see the power in tapping another trusted adult in your child or student's life. Um, uh, I think as an executive function coach, as a school psychologist, I can certainly see how and why that is necessary. Sometimes that resistance is so great coming from those adults or towards the adult that it really is just to make the smallest inroad. If it's tapping their counselor at school, or the teacher that you know that they're close with, or an aunt or an uncle, or quite frankly anyone that you feel comfortable with, trusting to have a potential entry conversation around these topics with your child is certainly worth thinking about.
Thank you so much. Um, Brenden, this question might be more directed for you, but just around thinking about how to incorporate exercise in a teenager's life, are there ways of kind of incorporating play, or what would you say is like the best way for supporting teenagers that's kind of not adding stress or feeling like one more thing for many teenagers that have so much going on, or kind of what are the ways that we navigate that at Forman?
Yeah, great question. So to incorporate physical activity, you want to, for those that may not be, drawn to it, try to find activities that they may enjoy. I know some of our students partake in, extracurriculars such as boat building. They're being physically active for that, and other extracurriculars to name. So try to find outlets that keep you moving, keep you physically active, because being sedentary can really cause harm long term. So try to find forms of physical activity that you enjoy.
I feel like we need to take a moment to give Wendy Welshans a little bit of a shout out and explain that we do have a pretty robust wooden boat building program on our campus that our students are able to participate in. I know Chris mentioned that and Brendan mentioned that, so just wanted to give some information as context. We have kind of 2 trimesters where students are able to participate in that activity in the afternoon. It's very popular with our students and it's a truly wonderful program. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear in what we're referring to when we talk about boat building. I think maybe just kind of one more question is when you're feeling like your stress as a parent is getting mixed in with the stress of your teen, do you have any tips of kind of how to navigate that?
I think that's a great Jenai question, but I can say from a research side, I love when neuroscience supports what like common sense has always known. So there is a phenomenon called emotional contagion. So it's very real that as your own stress levels are going up, that can spread. And sometimes like against our best effort. So you might be very, very stressed and really trying to not let that show. And what we might do then inadvertently, I think, Jenai, this is a great question for you because I know that you help, have the experience of helping lots of families through scenarios like this. But that can feel inauthentic If the child or the young adult is picking up cues that you're stressed, and you as the adult are denying, saying, no, 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 it's fine. The intention there is good, but Jenai, I feel like you could really run with this one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's why I felt obligated to say that within the debrief and co-create, right? Because it's really important for you to own your part. You're absolutely right. And I think I'll even just talk about it from my own perspective, or even all of the women I've worked with, the moms, in relation to stress. But I feel like if there is just one thing that you can do, that you can choose to do on a daily basis, one small sliver of time, I know time feels impossible, but if you can pick one thing, and you know all of the options, right? Whether that's going for a walk, whether that's meditation, making sure you get sleep. Not everything is easy, but I also think we then create our own narrative, right? That we have to be perfect. We have to meditate for 20 minutes in silence, or it has to be like an hour workout to get the boost back. When that's just putting more pressure on us, that's making us carry more responsibility, and we feel we have to be perfect so that we can show up perfect for the children in our life. And that's real, and that's I absolutely want to acknowledge that and honor that. And amazing that we want to do that. But we also need to make sure that we are kind to ourselves. So it's giving ourselves permission to not be perfect. We're not going to be able to handle everything perfectly. And it's trying to pause. And, whether you like meditation or not, I have to say that has been extremely beneficial for me, because it literally almost has helped me like slow down time. And to acknowledge that like one moment at a time is all I can handle, right? And so identifying the one little thing you can do for yourself on a daily basis, or finding that little routine that will help you just take one step into the next is our best start. Ideally, you will then find your own beautiful routine of foundational practices that Brenden shared with us. But even when we're not perfect and you just get outside for a 5-minute walk, like live that, embrace that, and honestly be really proud of yourself that you even were able to pull that off for the day. So be kind to yourself, and know that you are doing your best for your child, and honestly, one moment at a time.
Yeah, I
I
can
think
definitely.
that's,
Oh,
oh,
sorry,
go
Ellie.
ahead, Brenden. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on that was great, Jenai. But I can definitely relate to this as a father of 3 young children too. There's always conflicts that arise, and this brings to my head what we teach in our health classroom, which is called the So Quick model. It's on conflict resolution, but it can relate to stress as well. This may be a new topic in the future, but what it states is, so again, it's so quick. So S, if you ever find yourself in a conflict and it's a stressful event, think of S. So first thing, just be aware, stay calm. O, think of the outcome. So foresee the future, what may happen, what the words that you say. Q, question, to try to gain their perspective on things. So ask questions, which kind of segues into U, which means you start to tend to understand their perspective. And then I, instead of what I've noticed, if I put somebody at blame and I say, you did this, you did that, it just makes matters worse. So try to share your perspective on things. Be like, I understand your stress. And this just shows some empathy and care. And then lastly, C, try to come up with a compromise at the end. So yeah, that's just something that came to mind in terms of conflict resolution and stress.
Thanks, Brenden. I think that's all we have time for tonight. We appreciate your participation. We appreciate your questions. We look forward to continuing the conversation. We hope to see you at future webinars, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much, and a huge thank you to our panelists. Have a great night.